1945. Surgeon General Shiroishi takes position as director over the infamous Unit 731, established in northeast China, a large compound surrounded by an electrified fence, a high wall and moat, containing a jail, an animal breeding unit, a bacterial breeding unit, and a crematorium. The facilities were disguised as a water purification facility, bringing in Chinese, Russian, Mongolian and Korean citizens. Shiroishi intended for these innocent lives to be experimented on for the research and advancement of biological and chemical warfare to benefit the Japanese military on the war front. The experimentation at Unit 731 has become known for its intense cruelty and callous disregard for human life. Victims were injected with bubonic plague. They were tortured for excessively long periods of time, forced to receive frostbite in controlled experiments that would cause irreversible damage. Poison gas was utilized to observe how long it would take to kill its victims. The cold hard truth of Unit 731 is that there were no survivors of these experiments. This horrific historic event is presented in Mou Tun-fei's, also known as T.F. Mou's, cult exploitation chiller Men Behind the Sun, sometimes alternatively titled as Man Behind the Sun and Black Sun 731, a film with an infamous reputation as one of the most disturbing films to exist due to its stark, brutal approach to depicting violence, and for its attempt to shed more light on a lesser-known example of war criminality during World War II. Initially planning to make a documentary on this difficult subject matter, Mou Tun-fei discovered that the Japanese military had destroyed much of the documentation, photographs, films and data gained through Unit 731. Therefore, Mou Tun-fei settled on staging recreations of these disturbing actions instead. Discussing the director Mou Tun-fei, Dr. Victor Fan and Wood Lin wrote about his early films for the Harvard Film Archive, stating that, sometimes dubbed the bestial director, Mou is mostly known for representing a raw and robust facet of Hong Kong cinema, working within the audacious language of new wave experimentation, as well as the crude aesthetics of softcore productions. While the disturbing reputation of Men Behind the Sun has given the film its infamous status, the suggestion of new wave experimentation, from a mixture of archive war footage, a lack of conventional three-act structure, and a wide set of secondary characters, and crude aesthetics reminiscent of softcore pulpy productions, is still very much present. The shock factor of Men Behind the Sun does verge almost into a pornographic film's attempt at historic recreation due to its pulpy approach. Men Behind the Sun deserves its reputation as a disturbing film. The violence is graphic and gory, confrontational in its nature, never shying away from its most shocking depictions of infanticide, prolonged biological and chemical torture, autopsies, cremations, executions and animal cruelty. Men Behind the Sun aims to depict the full extent of human evil performed in the name of military success, and its mix of practical makeup effects, pyrotechnics and miniatures assist in providing special effects that could make many viewers queasy. Men Behind the Sun isn't quite a character drama, but rather a staged catalogue demonstrating the monstrous forms of torturous experimentation that Surgeon General Shiroishi approved of in his desperation in Japan's war effort. In 1945, Japan was facing immense shortages of food, and the morale of the Japanese people was low, with widespread speculation that Japan was on the brink of losing the war. However, no matter the motivation to perform evil deeds, with a complete disregard for innocent human life, this does not in any way legitimize such malevolence. Surgeon General Shiroishi was a war criminal, and once arrested by American intelligence, it was agreed upon that he would be granted immunity from the persecution of his war crimes in the International Military Tribunal for the Far East by the United States government, in exchange for any surviving documentation and research retained from Unit 731 for the United States' own benefit. Surgeon General General Shiroishi is possibly the closest character to a protagonist in Men Behind the Sun. It is his callous actions and demands that are carried out throughout the film. The dramatised role is performed by Gang Wang, who is made to resemble the real-life figure of death and torture surprisingly effectively. However, with a lack of focus on characterisation and development, and a primary focus on the grotesque nature of the war crimes committed at Unit 731, with an emphasis on their violent nature, Men Behind the Sun is unmistakably an exploitation film. When victims are killed, their names, ages and nationality highlighted on screen, there is something distasteful in a film reveling in the cruelty of these tortures for morbid entertainment, as if diminishing the real-life suffering of real people into violent spectacles for anyone curious enough to watch. Whether it was the director's intention or not, and the director's final dedication of the film to the victims of Unit 731 seems like an attempt to pay his respects, what Men Behind the Sun does is sensationalizes the war crimes and suffering that took place at Unit 731. While sensitive topics do deserve exploration within cinema, with a much needed nuance and empathy, Men Behind the Sun's approach to its sensitive topic is more like a sledgehammer to a carton of eggs. It's blunt, gratuitous, and it's brutal. Men Behind the Sun is exploitation pulp through and through. Brief scenes portraying the members of the Youth Corps, soldiers in training, as they look away during the more grisly experiments, or the outbursts of criticism as the Youth Corps members drink and eat in joviality, criticising the selfish nature of these experiments, expressing how the victims are undeserving of this cruelty, aim to demonstrate a sense of humanity that is critical of the lack of empathy that must have been necessary to undertake such experimentation on another human being. These scenes showing their moments of empathy become quickly overshadowed when their potential drama is undermined, bearing little change on the inevitable outcome in favour of continued depictions of brutality. Maybe this is intentional. Mou Tun-fei's comment on how, no matter how much those within the system could disagree with it, they alone were not able to change what happened. It goes without saying that Men Behind the Sun is pessimism incarnate. In conclusion, Men Behind the Sun is a bitterly brutal exploitation film, deserving of its disturbing reputation, never avoiding horrific depictions that linger long after the film has finished. Whether it is a good film is debatable, depending on the viewer's perspective, as critics from Hong Kong and Japan have both questioned the accuracy of the film, but its reputation and legacy, despite its banned status in many regions, continues to spark the curiosities of extreme cinema audiences, like the splatter of blood on the Japanese flag as the final victim of Unit 731 is executed. The history of Unit 731 mars the secondary school history textbook understanding many of us may have of modern history. A special thank you to my super Patreon supporter Gil.